It's like, what on earth were we thinking? We just didn't know. We absolutely did not know. Okay, so we are live. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Ashley. This is Dyslexia Coffee Talk. And with us today is Kerry on coaching. I'm not even going to try to say her last name. I apologize.
Kerry Yonushonis. It's a very Lithuanian last name.
There you go. See, I just would have not done that as well at all, despite, 4 years of studying Russian. I just,
yeah, try learning that last name as a dyslexic. There's so many vowels in it. It was torture.
I can, yeah, no. Thank you for joining us today. I love that we're going to have this conversation because, we've been talking a lot about anxiety and stress and depression and everything that's been going on or everything that our community goes through, but not just our children, but us as families and as parents. And I think you saw the live I did on New Year's Day where I was like, surprise, I've got anxiety and, I'm coming to terms with that. But let's talk about the emotional toll that this takes on families. So you and I were just talking about some of that. I almost don't even know where to begin, but you've done some great things to help raise awareness for dyslexia and give our kids strength and courage. And do you want to talk about the swimming?
Sure, I can start there. Just some background on me. I am dyslexic and then have an awesome son who is now 15, but he was diagnosed with dyslexia when he was 4. And once he was diagnosed, he was diagnosed very early. When he was diagnosed, I started my advocacy and I used my marathon swimming as a platform to raise awareness for the strengths and struggles of dyslexics. And I'm a therapist professionally. And so as I was using my channel swimming, I started to get more recognition and people started to recognize, oh, but you're also a therapist. And there started to be these themes where parents would come to me with a lot of these challenges that they had with their kids. And it wasn't just, hey, how do I maneuver an IEP, 504 versus IEP? Give me a script? How do I talk to a teacher? In the beginning, it was that. But then once I realized I was a therapist, the conversation quickly shifted. And it was not just that my child has anxiety or lack of self-worth or, self-esteem. It's that our whole entire family is impacted by this one diagnosis. How can that be? So I started off with the marathon swimming and using my strengths, and it ended up, that advocacy work ended up shifting into working as a coach with these families that have dyslexia to help with what I call mental wellness. So to hopefully prevent those families from crashing and burning.
Right. But I think that's a hard thing for people to either come to terms with necessarily or be willing to talk about, is because it feels selfish as the parent, because I'm not dyslexic, and it feels selfish for me as the parent to say that this is taking an emotional toll on me because it's my son that's living it on a day-to-day basis. But I'm living it with him because I'm trying to navigate the school system for him. Where whereas he's living it day to day, in and out 24/7, 365, I'm the one that's trying to negotiate the needs for him. And, unfortunately, in some situations, creating the retaliation that happens against us because, I'm trying to say, here's idea, here's the law, here's what I want you to do, here's his needs, here's his diagnosis. Why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you following his accommodations? Why aren't,
Why is everything so slow? Right? That's one of the other things too. My gosh, why are we moving at such a snail's pace when we know that this is a crisis situation our kids are in? Right. But I love that. I don't love it that you're in pain, but but that point, one of the phrases I use is that if somebody at our dinner table has dyslexia, we are all impacted, because let's just take an example. the child, has been working their tail off at school and they're exhausted. They sit down at the dinner table and their sibling just pokes them one too many times. Boom, big emotions come out, right? And then as a parent, right, I don't know if this is your situation, but like you've been on the phone all day with the school, also managing your job. And now all of a sudden you have two kids that are fighting at the table. And that's the last thing you need, because here you're trying your best to advocate for him. And you are now in another stressful situation. Can't we just have a calm dinner? These are the types of things I hear from families a lot.
Definitely. And, and so for us, I only have the one, which I think that was sort of, a divine plan. I'm so loud. I don't know that I could do this for two. I don't know that I have the emotional wherewithal to do this for more than one, but I like how you put that, because it is, and everybody's bringing their own emotional package from the day, regardless of what it is. I'm thinking pre-COVID life, where everybody's going off to their offices or schools or, wherever it is that they're going, whatever interactions they have during the day. And then one of the things I like to talk about is the noise of communication. How, it's in my head one way, and I think I'm going to say how it is in my head. But, I've got my emotional filters for what I'm going to say. And then there's this space between you and I, and then you're going to hear it. And it's your emotional filters and what you hear and how you process that in your head and your heart. And I could say the cat's on the roof, and you might hear me say the cat got hit by a car. That's a wild example that would never happen, but that's just meant to draw the parallel between what we think we hear and what we think we say versus what the person actually hears. And then when you take into consideration the emotional story that's going on inside that person that day or lifelong or whatever it may be, how that just is going to create the outcome that you may not necessarily want from the situation.
That brings up the concept of cognitive distortions. So
yes.
For kids, so cognitive distortions are, the way I describe it for kids, are thinking errors, right? So we go through life and we end up developing, some defense mechanisms, and eventually we have these thinking errors. So one could be dismissing the positive, right? That filter you have, right? The world's coming in and you have this coffee filter here and things are coming in and you're filtering out the positive and you're just left with like the negativity. So for parents, I would call that, I have my list over here, I would call that, discounting the positives. But for kids, I would say, ooh, I don't know, is that a thinking error? Are you throwing away the good? Right. So for kids, I put it in terms of thinking errors, because I think knowledge is power. And if they understand, oh, everybody has thinking errors, I don't necessarily have to believe that feeling I have. I might be able to look and see, oh, am I using a certain type of filter right now? So it's one of the things we talk about as families. And then also, with the child with dyslexia, it's important to understand what are their distortions, because it impacts their stress level. If they have that distortion of maybe, let's say, mislabeling, they feel like they get mislabeled a lot by their friends or their peers. They might start misinterpreting the way someone looked at them. And they might think, oh, he's giving me, the side eye. That's because nobody likes me. It's important for them to understand that they might have some of these cognitive distortions or thinking errors, because that directly impacts that level of stress they feel.
Yeah. And I like that a lot. My son talks about his challenges in communication. Like he's an extremely loquacious, huge vocabulary, 13-year-old. But at the same time, when you're talking to him, that's not necessarily what he hears. But where he talks about that happening more than anything else is in the school environment. He thinks he hears the teacher say one thing, and he does what he thinks he heard the teacher say. And then it turns out that he was completely wrong. And then he almost doesn't know how to cope with that. you know, and so he's been trying to go back to the teacher and go, that's not what I heard. This is what I heard you say. And sometimes they're understanding and sometimes, unfortunately, they're not. And
yeah. Well, I have a hysterical story. Do you want to hear
a
very funny story? I can't always share it in every company, but I feel like you're pretty genuine. You'll appreciate it. So I was growing up in Egypt and my dad was a medical researcher and he had traveled to, I think it was like Djibouti, right? Like some country not a lot of people go to. And he ended up getting this intestinal parasite called Giardia.
Oh, wow.
All right. So he comes back to Egypt and he's really sick for several weeks. And 3 weeks later, we have this embassy function that we have to go to. And my parents were always the type of parents, you know, hey kids, you know, you're representing America. It's really important you have proper etiquette. And so they would always give us these lectures before we would go to any embassy event. So we're at this embassy event and I knew my friends were there. They're kind of like in the back. But as we come in, there's all these different circles of doctors, some people from the World Health Organization, I mean, like big people. And so some of them I knew, and they would say, oh, hi, Kerry, how are you? How's your dad feeling? We heard he was sick. Well, that same week, my dad was sick. I was in junior high and we were having health. And I had this Peace Corps worker who was very overly zealous about family planning. That was her specialty. And so we had a week-long discussion about STDs. Well, there's an STD that begins with a G and ends with an A, gonorrhea. Oh. So I'm at this embassy function and people, like I'm over here, my parents are somewhere else, and I just want to get to my friends. And this one group, they said, oh, how's your dad? I was like, oh, he's okay. It's just a little case of gonorrhea. He's good. He's good. And I could see this shift on their faces. So you know, your son may not be going around saying the word gonorrhea, but I could see this shift on everybody's face in the circle, but I don't know what I did wrong.
Right.
I know I did something wrong. And now I know there's something wrong with me because everybody's giving me these quizzical looks. So I'm like, okay, done with that group. So now I'm trying to go again. And it happened again in another circle. And again, people are giving me this look. So finally, at one point, my dad is in the same circle as I am. And they're like, Bill, how are you feeling? Are you feeling better? And he goes, and I said, Dad, would you just tell him it's just a little case of gonorrhea? And with that, my dad's face also did what everybody else's did. But because he's my dad, I knew how to read his face. And I just knew my foot was in my mouth. So I think a lot of dyslexics, we walk around with our foot in the mouth and we don't necessarily, like, we know we've done something wrong, but we don't know why. And we don't know how to explain it. And so that just reminded me of that story. You know, your son, like thinking he hears something, he's doing what he thinks is right, but he's making a mistake in the process and he doesn't know why.
Right. 100%. So talking more about anxiety, you know, and you've got the anxiety stress connection that the International Dyslexia Association has the paper on, and our kids are so misunderstood from the anxiety and the depression side, you know, and a lot of how they behave is pushed off as behavior. And it's not behavior. You know, behavior is communication. And I think most people forget that. They think behavior is behavior for behavior's sake. But unless you're a sociopath, you don't engage in behavior as a form of behavior for the sake of behavior. For everybody, behavior is communication. And I feel like our educational institution has forgotten that or their misunderstanding of dyslexia is truthfully so severely off base that they just don't get what our kids are trying to communicate to the people around them.
Go ahead.
No, please.
To the point of dyslexia is so misunderstood. I was on a podcast recently and I'm hoping that it will just be buried forever because the host said he was talking about dyslexia. And then he said, you know, I hear that there's a higher rate of dyslexics in the juvenile detention centers. And I was about to say, well, I mean, they develop, you know, if you go, what I was about to say to him is, if you go through your life every single day having this pain point being hit, every single day you think you're stupid. right? And it goes on for years. Well, if you don't have a healthy way to cope with that, you're going to start using drugs. You're going to start having these unhealthy coping strategies. But before I could even say that to him, he made this gigantic leap. And he said, so, I mean, are scientists trying to find, the gene? Is there a dyslexic gene that leaves dyslexics more apt to criminality? And I couldn't believe he made that leap. I was literally shocked. And where do you start if that's someone's understanding of dyslexia? Isn't that insane?
That's a new one on me. And I'm sure right now my messenger is blowing up from my friends who just heard you say that.
Yeah.
And they're going to be like messaging me to message you to say, who is this person?
How can we troll him?
Yeah. Wow.
So I think, we are in this world of dyslexia. And so we hear this discrimination daily and we hear these myths, but we're also hearing it within our own little world. When we step out of our bubble, I think that discrimination and misunderstanding is even more magnified. Yeah. So is it any wonder that our children feel anxiety when they have that pain button hit every single day?
And anxiety, okay, so I'm 48 years old and it's only been in the last few months that I'm sort of coming to grips with my own anxiety. And the things that I have anxiety on, I've carried them quite literally my entire life. I don't come to anxiety as a new thing, it's something that it's me going, so that's why I behaved that way when I was 7 or whatever. But I feel like anxiety is so misunderstood. And, I don't even talk about it very openly within my own family because I feel like people are going to look back at me and go, but that's just life. That's just normal. I don't, and having to make other family members come to terms with their own anxiety is a conversation I don't want to take place. But, when I went to my son and I sat down in front of him and I said, I want to have a conversation with you. And, he can't sit still for any conversation. He's walking around the room the whole time. And I go, I think that I have anxiety and I think that you do too. Mm-hmm. He completely froze and turned around and looked at me and went, now? Really? Right now? And I went, what do you mean? He goes, you just took the biggest boulder, like Wile E. Coyote, and you just decided to dump it on top of my head. And I went, is that a bad thing then? And all of a sudden we spent the next 2 hours talking about his anxiety and the things that make him afraid. And all of us, years I've been wanting the kid to open up to me, and all of a sudden he just poured forth. And I was like, oh, it's beautiful. Wow. I wasn't expecting this. But he understood his anxiety at a level that I didn't even have an appreciation for. And what's funny is now when I do or say something, he looks at me, he's like, that's your anxiety talking. Or he'll do and say something back to me. And I'm like, right back at you, kid. But how do we raise awareness about what anxiety is and how anxiety drives people?
Gosh, that's a good question. I can tell you how I work with families and raise their awareness. So coming into this today, I had two big goals. I wanted your audience to walk away with 2 tangible things they can walk away with and apply today, right? So it's not just like another dyslexic coming and talking about, all the gifts of dyslexia, because they do come at a cost, right? There's a lot of costs that come with it.
And we try not to sugarcoat that and, go to the world and go, dyslexia is a gift because, one of our co-founders is dyslexic. And she's like, no, it's not.
Yeah, it's, and you know what, there might be gifts that come later on, but for sure, in our families, as we're hoping our kids can not have a panic attack in class during the exam, it sure does not feel like a gift right then. So yeah, no, that's why I appreciate you guys are always, I think, just spot on with the honesty about it. There's a lot of toxic positivity out there, which I think makes it difficult to talk about anxiety in our circles of dyslexia.
Yes, 100%.
Mm-hmm. So this is how I approach families and talking to them about anxiety. So you know how your son said, you just dumped that huge boulder on me? Mm-hmm. It felt like this massive weight that came upon him. A lot of times we feel that way with anxiety. We just feel like we're in a constant state of anxiety. We have that pain point hit so many times where we're just vibrating almost. So one of the things I try to have my families do is look at our stress bucket and what goes into the stress bucket that makes us stressed during the day. But with kids, and also adults too, I think it's important to sometimes say, what are the 5 stress buckets? Let's actually divide the stress up. Instead of just saying we have anxiety and it's omnipresent, what if we give it themes? What if maybe one of those buckets, the theme is friendships? One of the themes is work. One of the themes is being misunderstood, right? That's a big one for dyslexics, just that constant feeling of being misunderstood. Another bucket could be, comparison with siblings, like just that bucket of comparison. Mm-hmm. And then the last bucket, whatever, it could be, I didn't do so well in my soccer game that I wanted to excel in. So starting to build themes around anxiety is really good to do because it starts to contain it. And it starts to, kids just feel like anxiety, they're out of control. So if we put it into buckets, let's say they're like, oh, it was awful. It was such a bad day. Okay, well, hey, and I actually have like a worksheet I do with people. Which bucket is it that today your stress fell into? So now we're starting to look at anxiety and we're able to contain it a little bit more instead of it exploding everywhere. So the goal of anxiety is to kind of contain it and then be able to also do calming and grounding techniques to bring it down even more, so contain it, understand what actually the activating event was, and then a grounding technique for calming.
I love that because you're right. Anxiety is not all encompassing. There's usually a thing that the anxiety is centered around. It can become all encompassing.
It can, absolutely. It can, because our body doesn't know the difference, right? Between, let's say I almost got in a car crash and I'm advocating against the school district and it's so frustrating. And, the cat just knocked over the dinner and it fell on the floor. Eventually that anxiety, the body doesn't, I guess what I'm trying to say is the body doesn't know, the brain body connection, it doesn't always know the difference, between something that's maybe a 5 versus a 10. And we end up operating at a 10 a lot of the time. So by containing it into these different buckets, we're also kind of rating the anxiety. So we're recognizing not everything has to be crisis mode.
I like that. I like that a lot, especially as a kid is moving into the teenage years and the emotions are kicking into overdrive because the hormones are kicking in overdrive. The social situations are kicking into overdrive and the games and all of that jazz. Mm-hmm.
It's a lot. It's a lot. I talk about kind of the trajectory that I see, and I'm interested to know, if I can't see any of the comments, but if people, if they're watching this later, if they could write in, what was the progression they saw with their child with dyslexia? Because one of the common themes I see is we have a child who's in elementary school, who's diagnosed dyslexic. Parents, oftentimes, if they're not dyslexic, have no idea. So they're trying to play catch up. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, them catching up, also means, oh wait, now also I have to be an advocate. I have to figure, what is an IEP? What is this? What is that? What is the pseudoscience, right? A lot of these parents in those early years are getting ripped off with vision therapy to fix dyslexia. They spend tens of thousands of dollars on that. So the beginning years of dyslexia in elementary school is a lot of catch up, and the parents can be disconnected from that child's emotional experience, right? Because the parent is getting angry, not at the child, just angry at dyslexia. And that anger and anxiety are just kind of like becoming their own force with these parents. And so they're missing a lot of those pain points that the kids are getting in early elementary. Then the kids go up to upper L, right? Where it's no longer learning to read, it's reading to learn. And so now all of a sudden they're highly aware of, okay, I'm not getting that information everybody else is getting. And so they start that level of self-consciousness. I think our dyslexic kids do earlier than a lot of their peers. A lot of their peers, maybe that self-consciousness, it kicks in more like in middle school. For our kids, it kicks in earlier, and our kids are really smart. They know that they're missing out. Mm-hmm. So then you send them off to middle school, and, middle school is mean girls. And I learned lots of mean boys too are in middle school. And now you start to have those hormones kicking in. So you have these kids with low self-esteem going into a new school, feeling like they don't fit, and then a new school on top of that, trying to find their peer group. Those pain points become much more intense. And if we miss that as parents in elementary school, it's really important that we start to catch it in middle school. Basically, parents say to me, oh my God, well, my kid's in high school, I've totally failed him then. I'm like, well, no, we can still work on those pain points, but the earlier the parents can catch it, the better. And then the kids go into high school, and guess what happens in high school? All those same pain points, if they're not addressed and they're not validated, well, now they're in high school and they have access to a car, and you can bet trouble can happen really fast.
Yeah, really, really fast. That was one of the interesting things for me, though, is, like I said, my son's always kind of been a closed book. He's always really played his emotions close to his chest. And once I brought out the anxiety thing, over the following weeks, different subjects would come up. Mm-hmm. And I have always made a big effort, regardless of how I felt about a particular person on his team. I never discussed that with him. Mm-hmm. I discussed my advocacy. I discussed the things that I was working for, what his accommodations were. If things weren't going well, and trying to get him what he needed, he knew all that, but he never, I never said, Mrs. So-and-so or Mr. So-and-so, I really hate them because of, whatever. I never did that. Mm-hmm. I never wanted him to go to school and look at his teacher or his principal or somebody who I may be, really hard butting heads with, and look at, and have that change his relationship
perception
with that person. Mm-hmm. Right. Because we do influence how our children behave with other adults if we share mm-hmm. our own, what's the word I'm looking for? Our own conflict with people. And mm-hmm. I never wanted to do that. So, he's in junior high now. I have this anxiety conversation with him, and he lists out all of the teachers who he knew hated him.
And was there a similarity? Like, did they match up?
He was spot on. And I don't say that in a teacher bashing way, because we all know that we're all individual human beings, and we're not going to get along with everybody, regardless of how good of a person you may be. We're just not going to get along with every single human being walking around on the face of the planet. And sometimes that's directed at children too. Yeah. And whether their dislike of him was retaliation against me, or maybe they just don't understand dyslexia and they think that he's just being a difficult child, whatever it was, I was trying to not influence that dynamic again between him and the teacher. But it was just, our list was perfectly tied. And I was sitting here going, I'm sorry that caused you so much pain. I wish you had felt comfortable enough to have that conversation with me at the time. And he looked at me, he goes, I didn't know how to tell you, because I didn't want you to hate my teacher, Mom. Mm-hmm. And mm-hmm. I'm sitting here going, but I'm yelling at her in these IEP meetings over here. Right. How dare you? Again, not teacher bashing. This was very specific.
Very specific reasons.
Specific thing that happened. But I've kind of forgotten where I'm going, because now I'm getting emotionally flustered because I remember this.
Can I jump in?
Please save me.
So actually, I think sometimes we do our children a disservice by keeping all of those emotions to ourselves, because oftentimes our kids are having those same feelings, but they're looking to us as role models, and they're saying, well, gosh, I never hear my mom say a bad word about my teacher, or a disagreement about, whoever the carpool person is that I feel like talks rudely to me. And so they end up feeling isolated in their own, I guess, pain or anxiety. They start to feel isolated. And when your son said, well, I didn't know how to say that, that's one of the things I work on with parents is I like to raise parents to become guides for their kids, because if we sit back and wait for our dyslexic kids to find the right words to talk about their anxiety, their stress, their depression, their fears, right? Their lack of self-worth. If we wait for them to find the right words, well, good Lord, I mean, we may never even know their full experiences. So sure. I think as parents, it's okay for us to wear our emotions sometimes and let our kids see that I can be a good person, yet still have a lot of dislike for that one person.
Yeah. No, and I love that too. And I'll share another story where I had intentionally taken a teacher away from him for very specific reasons. And he lost his mind because he cared for her. He genuinely liked her. And I ended up crying in front of him because I had gone in there and I had thrown down the gauntlet and I had, achieved X, Y, and Z. And in the process of that, she went, I can't teach your son. And I went, no, you can't. We're done. And then that night, my son just absolutely melts down and says, why would you take her away from me?
Oh,
and so
wow.
And then I had to go back into another IEP meeting and go, so I need you to stay on the team because that's what my son wants. But here's what we're going to do if that's going to happen.
Yeah. Things have to look different if that's going to happen.
So that was a big, that was hard. And that was hard for me as a parent because I felt like I had achieved so much ground for what I knew that he needed. But then I was having to rebalance everything going, maybe I need to give on what he needs in order to address his emotional needs, because that's more important than this over here. He needs to be happy and stable and cared for, and he needs to feel safe. And right now he doesn't feel safe because I've made this change. I think that's hard for parents sometimes to grasp with as well.
I had a similar experience with one of my son's teachers, and I won't out them, but definitely I felt like an injustice had occurred, and that he should be removed from that classroom. But my son adored that teacher. So basically, it had to do with like paperwork for accommodations and things like that. So it wasn't, something that my son was really involved with. So he didn't understand like the egregious nature of what had been written down. That wasn't, he wasn't seeing that end of it. He just saw that he has a teacher he really likes, and the teacher is nice to him in class and, whatever. But I went into the school and it was the same thing. Like, he needs to get out of that class. I'm done. I can't believe this. And the school said, well, Luca really likes him. And I was like, oh, this is rough. This is rough. And I mean, I just had to bite the bullet and recognize that he was getting something from that classroom.
Yeah. And I think that that's hard because we feel so vindicated when there's so few battles that we win in advocacy. When we do win one, we feel so vindicated and so hallelujah kind of, and then to have to crawl some of that back and hat in hand go, so
anyways, you remember what I was saying?
Yeah, I need to take that back.
Well, I think sometimes it's okay this is a phrase I use a lot with my families. And I teach my kids to say this too. We are not bound by our first statement. Okay. So we might be like, blah, blah, blah. It's never too late to say, hey, I got to circle that back. I'm sorry. Let me circle back. That came out wrong. And it could even be 2 years later. Hey, by the way, I need to circle back to something. I said this and I was off. I thought I was spot on. I was off. So that idea that we're not bound to our first word or our first statement is important because it gives us that grace. And then it also gives our kids that grace because as, as they wear these big emotions as dyslexic kids, they need to know that they're safe at home to let it out. And guess what? They're still not bound to that first word because they're in a safe environment and they can always walk it back or circle around and we can talk about it more.
Yeah. And I think that I love how you said that because it's so important. And, before we went live, you and I were talking about grace. I'm a huge believer in grace because even the best a person is, they're going to say something wrong. They're going to do something wrong. And I've talked about, like hypothetically, I say something that really insults you. And, I kind of come to my senses and I'm like, Kerry, I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have done that. You can forgive me, but that doesn't mean you have to let me in your life because I call that grace with boundaries. But, what I've always tried to teach my son is because he wasn't communicating. I've always tried to teach him, especially as they're coming up and they're little kids, and especially like when they're toddlers, they hit you and, the little things that kids do as they're kind of learning about emotions and, they're creatures of pure emotion. That's what they are. And then you throw them into life and they're trying to navigate that while still remaining creatures of pure emotion. And what I always, from the earliest points, what I've always told to him is I'm like, you are allowed to be angry at me, but you can't abuse me. You can be mad at me. You can say, Mom, I'm mad at you because of whatever. Great. I want you to tell me that you're mad at me. We're going to talk about it. You don't get to be mean to me because you're mad at me. And if you're mean to me, we're going to talk about why you're mean to me first.
Because then we have two problems.
Right. And I found that, at least between he and I found that to be this great communication tool. Because I'll never forget, his dad got really mad at him once, and my husband was unjustly angry, which was its own thing. But it really upset my son, and my son looked at me because I went up to comfort him because my husband was in the wrong. And I went up to comfort him, and he goes, "He's as nice as a flower to you, and he's as mean as a bear to me." And I was like, all right, I'm going to go deal. And, and I talked a long time to my husband and I was like, here's why you were wrong. And here's what you're going to do about it. And, these are your choices, black and white. There's no gray area here.
Yep.
And he went and he did the right thing. But a lot of it came from his lack of understanding about dyslexia. And, he's rattling off a list of 19 things that I want you to go do. And, our son gets to like number 2, and then he's off playing on his iPad and, he's in trouble because he didn't do 3 through 19.
Why don't they just listen? I usually say I hate to generalize, but a lot of times it's the husband's not reading the books. So it's the wife that's read the books and the wife that has the knowledge. And, as I was talking, I don't know if it was once we had started going live, but we were talking before, that having a child with a disability with dyslexia, learning difference, it can cause a lot of friction in the couple. And you have one person who's read the books, one person who hasn't read the books. This person becomes the expert, and then this person resents that, right? That why do you get to be the expert on this? I'm the dad too, or I'm the partner too in this. And there becomes an imbalance.
100%. So I dealt with that, unfortunately, because Houston branch, the IDA, had no, not them. It was Nyhouse hosted the Shaywitzes. And so I looked at him and I went, come hell or high water, you're taking the day off.
I love
and
it.
He sat in front of me, because you're at these 8 tops, and he sat in front of me, and the number of times he turned around and looked at me and went, so sorry. And then he listened to it, and he come back and he's like, oh my God. And I was sitting there going, score.
By the end of the day, he could have slid out, I bet he was like shrinking in his chair. Oh, that's funny.
And I didn't do that to be mean. I did it because I wanted him to understand.
Well,
and I was like, what a golden opportunity. It's the Shaywitzes.
Yeah. And he needed to hear it from somebody who wasn't his spouse. And that's oftentimes with my families, they need to hear it from somebody else who's a third party, because, even in our relationships and in our marriages, we still have those filters. And we don't have a lot of those filters sometimes when it's that professional expert in the room giving us the information.
Yes, 100%. So I want to go back to something that you touched on a few minutes ago. People wasting money on therapies that they're just snake oil. There's so many of them out there.
There's so many of them out there. And it's so disheartening, first of all, especially since I'm a professional in this field, to know that by the time people have come to me that they've had, even Kumon, like people will put their kids in Kumon and do the drill and kill, thinking that will help with dyslexia. They're told, yep, have your kid here. We're going to move them through this many grade levels. And so these poor kids are doing the drill and kill through Kumon, and it's not working. Kumon works great for other people, but that is not the right intervention for a dyslexic. Then there's these brain centers that are opening up a lot lately. Have you seen these?
Yes. There's one very close to me, and they're advertising like crazy, and they're targeting our community. And I'm sitting here going, and some of the people that have liked them, I'm like, you should know better. And trying to keep my mouth shut. And at the same time, I'm dying over here.
Yeah. So there's a lot of these brain centers that are opening up, making wild claims that they can move your kid, that they can improve your child. Well, first of all, they can improve your child's spelling. And it's by, they bounce on a ball while they're singing a song, and to me, it just sounds like a lot of overstimulation of the brain. But
the one by me is even advertising diet.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
If you just cut out gluten, right, and red dye, your child will no longer have dyslexia.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
That it's part of their brain balance therapy.
Yeah. I was trained up in neurofeedback, which is a very well-known treatment for people who have seizures. And it works with, it does work with certain conditions. It does not work for dyslexia. And it is a very expensive treatment. And people will put a lot of money into that. And does it help maybe with the child's anxiety? Sure, but it's not helping with the dyslexia, but they see it help in one area. So they make this sweeping statement saying, well, I'm seeing such a difference in my child. It must help with dyslexia. Then, the vision therapy, I just can't even, I don't even know where to start with that. Our kids could, go ahead.
Do you remember when those glasses showed up on that live with Kelly and whoever her co-host is? That was 3 years ago, I think. There was a segment with these prism lenses out of France, and it was on Live with Kelly.
Uh-huh.
There was a concerted effort to get that taken down, and it got taken down.
Interesting.
It did. I talked to the journalist who presented it, and over email, I didn't talk to him in person, but I was like, as a journalist, you have a responsibility to do your due diligence before presenting snake oil to millions of people at 10 o'clock in the morning on one of the biggest watched TV shows that exist.
And a vulnerable population.
Exactly. And his response was less than pleasurable, because he said, I was simply doing my job.
Mm.
And I was like, well, you failed at your job then. But I reached out to the company in France and I said, show me your research. I mean, you're saying that this is all scientifically based, forward your research. And they said, thank you so much for your letter. We look forward to you being a customer. And I was like,
well, a lot of them too, a lot of these different snake oil companies, right? They will have a lot of papers published, but not peer reviewed. So they have them published within a magazine with all the other people that also believe and are selling this as well. So it presents like, oh, well, it's in this people are thinking this must be a scholarly magazine, and it's not. It's just a bunch of these people have gotten together and dumped articles in there to look good on the internet, but they're not peer reviewed and they're not scientifically proven either. So the amount, or even just parents had spent a lot of money just on reading tutoring. And they don't know, the reading tutor has not told them, look, I don't have a specialty in dyslexia. I actually have no clue what I'm doing. Because as we all know, right, the cult teachers or cult therapists are very differently trained.
They are, definitely. And like, you're probably the same way, but I'm on Facebook. I've joined a bunch of like the neighborhood mom area kind of thick groups, and every now and then there's a question about dyslexia, and the number of and I have a hard time engaging with those. I'll put a link to my website. I'm like, if you ever want to talk, here. But what I find most of the time is those types of comments are more I don't want to say that they're not ready for the information, because they are ready for the information, but what I sort of figured out is the parent at the beginning of this journey has to move enough beyond their immediate emotional reaction to be able to take in information. But if they can't move beyond that immediate emotional reaction, because we're a fix-it society, right? We're a fix-it society and we want it now. And, like your car's broken, you're either going to fix it or you're going to go get a new one. And the lack of understanding about dyslexia and, your child suffering, you don't want your child to suffer. I mean, there's no bigger pain as a parent than to have your child suffer under something. And so you leap into these things because it's slick ads. It looks good. Everybody looks professional, quick fix. Yes, we can help you 100% right now, and what was weird for me was I was in kind of a different place because I work full-time. My husband works full-time, and I didn't know about social media. I was Googling things. I wasn't using dyslexia. I was using my child can't read and various things like that. And I don't, because of the year, because it was 2016, there wasn't quite so much snake oil out there, but where I became more frustrated was everything was like 10 to noon on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Oh. But it was, nothing felt right. Nothing sounded right. Nothing, I spent weeks trying to find how and where do we even begin? Because it was like, nothing was ringing as true. Nothing was ringing as helpful. And maybe that's my analytical mind more than anything else, but it was just, but anyway, that's what I find with parents. We want to help our children and we want it immediately, we want to wrap them up in a blanket when they fall down and skin their knee and, blow kisses on it and stick a Band-Aid on it and dry their tears and give them chocolate ice cream and go, everything's going to be okay.
Right. We do. And
we can't do that.
we can't. One of the biggest things is we can't protect our children from their emotions. If we are always rescuing our kids from their emotions, they never learn how to navigate through them. And it is hard, right? I mean, I remember those days bringing my son to his tutor after he's already done a full day of school, and he's crying in the car because the last thing he wants to do is reading therapy. And, you know, I would sit on the couch and listen to it. Believe me, it did not sound fun. I don't blame him. But, you know, if we keep trying to rescue our kids from their emotions, instead of teaching them grounding and coping skills to maneuver their emotions, then they're just going to go into junior high and high school and into life with big emotions that they don't know how to deal with.
Completely agree. Except we want to save them.
We do. I know.
Especially when they hit the wall when they're so little.
Yeah. You know, one of the phrases I use with my son, and now that he's 15, he actually, like he said it the other day, he was having a hard day. And I said, well, you remember Luca? And he goes, I know. Feelings are just temporary. But that's one of the phrases I always have said to him. And sure enough, an hour later, he said, yeah, they really are just temporary.
I love that.
So it's a really good phrase. Like that, kids can wrap their heads around that. And so they can be crying right now. And our job is just to maybe put our hand around them and say that was really hard.
Yeah.
And then when we see them later on skipping and jumping around saying, hey, you remember how you felt badly earlier? I want to circle back to that. Remember, feelings are always temporary.
I like that, because my challenge is, you know, my son's anxiety sort of overwhelms him on one thing. And then it doesn't matter that 90% of his day was great and 10% of it was bad. In his mind, the whole day was bad. And I'm stealing that phrase.
It's a good phrase. That's a good one. But that's also where the buckets come in, right?
Yeah.
Hey, well,
Definitely.
how many buckets were filled with good things today? You know, so it's not toxic positivity. We're not going to reject that you had a hard day in this bucket, right? This bucket is filled with a lot of tears from a hard day. Tell me some good things that happened in the other buckets. There's a book, it's called, I want to say The Whole Brainchild. Have you read that book?
I've not read that one. No.
It's fantastic. It talks about our children, their brains are not fully developed and connected, right? So they live either in the emotional side of their brain or they live in the analytical side of their brain. And when our kids have these meltdowns, usually it's when they're younger, but it can still even happen in junior high and high school, they have these meltdowns. What do parents try to do? We try to fix it. We try to rescue them from that emotion. We'll say things like, okay, do you really think she meant it that way? Did she really say it like that? Or, you know, and we end up diminishing that emotion that they have and that experience in their narrative. Really what we're supposed to do, they're highly in this emotional side of the brain. Our job is just to be still and be with them. It might be an arm around them. It might be like, gosh, that sounds so hard. But what we do is try to rescue. And I think the reason why parents we try to rescue is because it triggers our own anxiety. And our anxiety starts it's percolating. I'm seeing my son suffer and now I'm percolating with anxiety. I don't feel good. I need to fix him so I can be okay. And that's where a boundary comes in, right? And it's so hard. Like, I mean, I'm speaking to everybody. I'm also speaking to myself as I'm saying this, but that boundary of where do I stop and where does my child begin?
Yeah.
It's really hard, you know, especially as teenagers, when you see their heart get broken, you're like, oh my God, it's like a sucker punch.
Yeah. I'm going to have to work on that one. I'm going to have to work really hard on that one. Because I think it's so true.
Right. So we get anxious, they get anxious, we get anxious for them. We want to fix it. And by fixing it, we're going to feel better. And it's really, that's just, it logically doesn't make sense in the big picture though. Because it's temporary. It's a temporary fix. It's like a Band-Aid.
Yeah. So we've been on for almost an hour and I want to be respectful of your time. But one of the questions I typically ask people is, and I know that there's a couple things that you wanted to cover, is outside of everything we've talked about so far, is there anything else you want to highlight? Or anything I've missed?
No, I think you've hit on everything. The big two things I wanted to highlight for parents, I wanted them to walk away with skill set. So the skill set of the buckets. having their child start kind of dividing that anxiety up into, it might be 3, it might be 5 buckets, so that they're starting to learn to contain it. So the whole day isn't bad. It's this one section of my day I struggled with. And then the other one was the cognitive distortions, teaching them that we can have, and for them, you would call it a thinking error. So if your child, you can Google top 10 cognitive distortions and learn what these distortions are. And you'll learn what your distortions are, right? The thinking errors as adults we have. But teaching our kids that they can have thinking errors is really empowering for them, because they can be maybe having a bad day and then say, oh, wait, this is that black and white thinking. This is all or nothing thinking. And so we're teaching them these really, I think parents, we underestimate these psychological tools that they can absorb early on that can really change their trajectory of how they absorb stress, and also how they can release the stress.
I like how you said that, though, because what I've always said about my son is he's an absolutist, because I was an absolutist. Mm-hmm. So I found him doing the same thing that I did as a child, which was, like maybe I might get upset with him about something and he would go, I'm such a bad kid. You need to get rid of all my toys. I said the same thing to my mom and dad. So I was like, you're not, I was like, it was this one little bitty thing. That's not who you are as a person. But he would make these absolute type of leaps with things. And I had a hard time coping with that, because I'm to this day, I'm still guilty of it in some ways, which is probably my anxiety more than anything else. But
so imagine instead, when he says, oh, just get rid of all of my toys, imagine it instead if at that time you said, gosh, that's that black or white thinking, or that, oh, it looks like you're filtering out all the good stuff. And now every time that something like that comes up, oh, it looks like you're filtering out the good stuff. It's now no longer, oh, I'm bad here, 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 here. It's, oh, wait, there's a thinking error that's a common denominator, right? So all of a sudden you're able to contain it into this little vessel, almost a theme. And kids can start to understand, and it helps them, it helps prevent them from thinking it's omnipresent everywhere. I don't know if I explained that quite right, but
no, it's sinking in. You did.
Okay. I guess the last thing is I have, if parents wanted to, they could go to my website. It's kerryoncoaching.com, Kerry, the Irish way, kerryoncoaching.com. I do have a free grounding guide that they can download, and it has 5 different ways that they can work with their kids and with themselves to ground and cope with big emotions. So it's something you could download today and be able to literally implement today.
I love that. I'm going to be downloading it. That's for sure. I'm writing things down over
here. Great.
So when my head turns this way, that's what I'm doing.
And if anyone has any questions, they can find me on Facebook at Kerry on Coaching. I'm happy to answer any questions people have.
This has been absolutely amazing. And I don't want you to hang up once we disconnect from Facebook, because I want to talk to you for a minute. But okay. Thank you so much for joining us. And everyone, I hope that this has been just as powerful for you as it has been for me. And I hope everyone has a great day.
Thank you so much.
Hold on.